Greetings. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. I'm Lexi Eve, and welcome back to another Walk Magick video. So today we have a somewhat short video, and I'm going to be analyzing Grimorium Sanctissimum. And this is a sex magic ritual, requires 2 partners, and it's located in the Appendices of Liber ABA Book 4. So in the big blue brick, the one edited and annotated by Bill Breeze, you'll find a 1.5 page Latin script, which is accompanied by the English translation. Now the problem with this text for newcomers is that it is coded, and it says to recite certain poems or invocations that advanced Elamites will know of, but newcomers may not. Therefore, I have made available in the description below the English translation in a full-length script that is easy to follow and understand, so you can download it for your own use, and this video will analyze everything in the script so that by the end of the discussion, everybody, no matter where you're at, will know exactly how to use this ritual structure. Mind you, I'm making this easy to follow for newcomers, but sex magic in general is not for new practitioners. Really, you need to be advanced enough to have a good grasp on the practice of dhyana, which is holding images still in your mind for extended periods of time. What that practice does is allow you to have a particular discipline in concentration. And with sex magic, that's very important because you need to have your intentions firmly planted in your mind without wavering. I've said this in past videos. When you're doing intention magic, if your mind wavers to something unrelated, you may end up manifesting that thing by accident. And that could range from absolutely harmless, in which case nothing will happen, your ritual just won't work, to absolutely catastrophic. I've met people who've told me stories when they were new and rambunctious and thinking that they had a good grasp. One story that comes to mind as a warning is somebody was doing intention magic because they were in prison at the time and they were being basically harassed and bullied by a police officer repeatedly to the point that their life was in jeopardy. So they used intention magic to basically harm this person. And yeah, I don't advocate this practice. There's other ways to handle that and to deal with your karma in such situations instead of causing more pain and conflict. But anyway, this person decided, I'm going to hurt this person with intention magic, and their mind slipped during the process of casting the intention, and they accidentally thought of another police officer, that was in the prison, who was a generally nice guy, never bothered anybody, just was there to do his job and keep the peace, never harassed anybody, never crossed any boundaries with any of the prisoners. And what happened by thinking of this other person instead of his initial target during the peak of the casting intention, about a week goes by and that person that he suddenly thought of by accident was in their shed, their garage, and the roof caved in on them. They weren't permanently injured, but they were hurt to the point they couldn't come into work for 2 or 3 weeks while they were healing. So this is not for newcomers. You could hurt yourself doing things like this if you're new. Not to mention, you need to understand nobody's entitled to sex just because they're a Delamite, just because they have a high degree or grade. It has to be consensual, and you have to understand the concepts of coming into union with another person and what it means for you two to share a common will. The will to procreate or the will to enjoy sexual pleasure. Or if casting intention magic, you both need to have that common intention aligned in both of your wills. Otherwise, you're going to find a lot of problems arising and a lot of incompatibilities between the two of you as ritual partners. So those are some things to take into account if you're new to these type of practices, so to speak. So, on this text itself, under the title, which is in English, The Most Holy Grimoire, there's a blurb, and it informs the reader that this book contains, quote, the secret of secrets, not yet to be revealed to the supreme kings of the OTO, end quote. So, this informs us that we are reading about sex magic, the very same magic which is portrayed and utilized in Liber 15, the Gnostic Mass. We're going to have copulation of the male and female magicians. Mind you, Crowley did this with Victor Newberg, so during the Paris workings, so it can be adapted to any gender. But for sake of this video, I'm going to be focusing on the union of a male and a female magician. And the sacraments are the bread and wine, the white wafer representing the male seed, and the red wine representing the menstrual blood or vaginal secretions, the pink inside the vulva, so to speak, that reddish color that the wine represents. And in this ritual, a cake of light and wine, though you can use them, you could adapt the ritual to use cake of light and wine. They're replaced with the aforementioned sexual fluids, which will be mixed and consumed, and we'll get to that in a moment. Prior to the ceremony, the priestess bathes, speaking the words of libation, quote, Asperges me domine hissapo et mundabar, lavabis me, et supir nivem diliababor, end quote. And this is translated as, Purge me, O Lord, with hyssop, and I shall be clean, wash me, and I shall be whiter than snow. The priestess will then garb herself with what ritual dress is chosen for her, and I recommend the Gnostic Mass attire of the priestess and the priest, so a white robe, and then the crown and headdress and red overrobe for the priest, blue, gold over white for the priestess. However, if you're working with a specific planet, you can look up the scale colors. Queen scale is very common, and people ask why is the queen scale the go-to, and it's because it's higher than the prince scale, which represents the mind. The princess scale is earth, so right, prince represents air, which is things of the intellectual part of the soul, and the queen scale represents the intuitive part of the soul. It's on that plane in Bina, the Neshama, and so it's higher than the mind part, but it's not too high where like the king scale is strictly dealing with Kether and the divine light, that vibration. So it's high enough that it's closer to the divine light, but it's not too low. So it's kind of in that Goldilocks zone. So that's why people go to the queen scale color. So you could use a queen scale color, say for the sun, some type of gold or yellow attire if you're working with the solar force, or just look through the queen scale and Jupiter working, you could have plum or blue. For Mars working, both people could wear red. So anyway, after her bath and her libation, she'll then ritualistically dress herself, and you'll say, quote, By the figurative mystery of this holy vestment, I clothe myself with the armor of salvation in the strength of the Most High, Ancor, Imachar, Amides, Diodonias, Anator, so that the end which I desire may be effected, O Adonai, through thy strength, to whom be praise and glory forever and ever. End quote. You could add an amen to the end if you like. You could intone those words, Ancor, Amachar, etc. You can intone Adonai, whatever suits you best. Now, it says during the ritual later on that she'll bathe the priest, but I recommend that it happen before the ritual actually starts, so I put it here. Then the priest bathes and garbs the priest in his vestments, saying the same statements of power she did for herself. You will then purify and consecrate the temple, cast the LBRP, LBRH, and any other suitable preliminary rituals. And I recommend that the priestess do this because it says that the maiden is in the center of the temple. Talk about that in a second. So yeah, I recommend that she does the preliminary circle castings so that when she starts and when she finishes, she'll end up back in the center of the temple. So you could even use elemental castings if it's a line or a planetary hexagram working, or even the supreme pentagram ritual. Just whatever works well in the context of this ritual that you're performing, what planet or god you're working with. The temple setup is as follows. A high altar. I recommend a bed in the east since this is going to be copulation, but you could have some type of high altar that is able to support your body weights together. And the invocation of whatever god you are working with or invoking in the west. For example, Aleister Crowley and Victor Newberg used this ritual in the Paris working, so in that case, Jupiterian invocations would be written and placed in the west. The priest is in the north. A candle, incense suitable to the nature of the working and thorable are in the south. And in the center of the temple is a 4-square stone or double square. altar, as prescribed in Book 2 of Liber ABA, and upon this square is, quote, an image of the supreme, vast, forbidden, ineffable, most holy God, and with a dagger, bell, oil, then a maiden. Let the image stand next to the book of the law. End quote. The image of this god can be one of the particular god being invoked, or, better, a stele of revealing, or, depending on what type of working you're doing, if it's high enough supernal forces, especially Catharian forces, an image of Baphomet would definitely be a good choice. The dagger should be used to cast the circles in the preliminary work. Also, in a moment it instructs to follow the opening of Liber Pyramidos, thus the dagger is necessary to cut across into the breast. Also, Pyramidos instructs to use a wand, so you can use a wand, you could use the side of the ficus, or you could use the dagger for those sections, depending on how you want to adapt that section of Pyramidos. The holy oil should be abramelin, though, or oil corresponding to the planet of the god invoked is also suitable. A maiden, as it says, is also in the center of the temple, thus the priestess does the preliminary rituals, circle castings, etc., so that she ends up in the center when she is finished. After preliminaries, she should kiss the book of the law as a sign of love and respect. You'll see in most traditions that have a holy book that they use in their ritual, they often kiss it. It's to show love and respect for the tradition, for the gods that are contained within that book, their words. Then, one of them, either the priest or priestess, I believe either is fine, will perform the opening of Liber Pyramidos. From, quote, Hail, Asi, Hail, Hor, Apep, let the sign speech beget, 2 strokes on the bell, banishing spiral dance, etc., end quote. All the way to, quote, Hail, Hor, Apep, unspoken name, thus is the Great Pyramid duly built, end quote. So it's basically the first section of Pyramidos. I think it's 00, or just section 0 of Pyramidos. The priestess goes to the west and says, quote, speeches of the god of the working, end quote. Thus, she will perform the invocation of whatever deity, planetary force, etc., that is the main function of this ritual. She and the priest go to the south, and she burns incense, saying, quote, inflame in us, Lord, the fire of your love, and the flame of eternal devotion, end quote. Then, like in the Gnostic Mass, instead of stroking the lance that the priest would have in the Gnostic Mass, she strokes the priest's phallus to bring about erection. I assume they either go together to the center or directly to the east, and the priestess invokes, quote, supreme, vast, unutterable, ineffable, most holy God, with words, thou who art beyond all I am, end quote. This is the opening poem from the ship, which is also recited by everyone present in the Gnostic Mass. So you'll see there's a couple more verses, and if you look at the script in the description below, you'll see I actually quoted the anthem, all parts of the anthem in a specific order, as per instructions of Grimorium Sanctissimum. The next section of this text is titled, quote, on the supreme sacrifice, end quote. I didn't write it in the script, it's an afterthought. The supreme sacrifice is destruction of the ego and the giving of each other's selves to one another in the love embrace. It's the most vulnerable thing between two people, giving each other sexually, giving each other to, the giving of oneself to another sexually. It's vulnerable. So that's the supreme sacrifice. It's the ultimate sacrament, if you will. This text then instructs, quote, then let the priest break the silence with the words of the holy versicle of that god particularly being invoked. A versicle is a short sentence, poem, or song, which has a responsorial. One could write something, some type of invocation or whatever verses, based on whatever god or planet is being invoked by the priestess, or you can use the anthem from Liber 15. I think that's best to be utilized in most cases, and together they speak the chorus, and then alternate the female and male verses back and forth. The next line states, quote, let him enter the Holy of Holies. Let him beware, let him beware, let him beware. Let the two who have become one sing in a high voice without intermission the words of the holy versicle, end quote. What this means is that the priest and priestess here are engaging in intercourse. Let him beware is written 3 times. To my mind, this insinuates prolonging orgasm for as long as possible. Really quick also, 3 represents the number 3, represents Bina, represents the supernal realm. Even though Keter, Chachma, and Bina are separate, there is no separation above the abyss. So even the Ein Sof, everything that's above the abyss, above Keter, all of those things are in absolute union. They're just symbolized by 3 separate spheres to categorize things of that union. Right? So, the priest should get to the cup of orgasm as many times as possible without going over the edge, stroking all the way to it, and then stopping and slowing down so as to withhold the orgasm. Eventually, a point will come that he cannot stop himself from going over the edge, at which point the 2 ritualists should have in their minds firmly whatever the intention of this ritual is, be it the invocation itself to accomplish the great work, or manifesting some aspect of their true wills. Also, the priestess most women, if they're with a partner that they're having orgasms with, most women orgasm more than once. Every time she goes through that climax, so to speak, for herself, even if it's a multiple orgasm, that intention should be firmly planted in her mind. That I'm going to go over a course for female sex magic in the future, so I'm not going to get too in detail with this, but all the energy that comes off in waves during that moment, that supreme moment, all of that energy should be collected, and the intention should be packed into that energy and sent out into the universe with that final bang. You know, it's kind of like you collect all the energy, and at that moment of orgasm, you use that pa to send it out, so to speak. During the intercourse, the previous quote also instructed that the versicle, those short responsorial invocations, should be repeated amongst the 2 participants. The priestess speaks the chorus of the anthem then, making me think the chorus can be omitted earlier and saved for this point, but you can do it twice, at the versicle and then again after the intercourse is over. And you look at the script, but in full, this quote goes, "For of the Father and the Son, the Holy Spirit is the norm, male, female, quintessential one, man being veiled in woman form, glory and worship in the highest, thou dove, mankind that deifiest, being that race most royally run, to spring sunshine through winter storm, glory and worship be to thee, sap of the world ash, wonder tree." After this, as is traditional with this formula, while the priestess is speaking that chorus, the semen and vaginal fluids, being mixed, are collected by the priest, who sucks them out with his mouth, then kisses the priestess. The 2 swoosh this elixir back and forth amongst them, consuming equal portions. Also, you could do more things with that. You could take some, mix it with albermelin oil, and you could use that to consecrate anything from chakras to talisman to magical weapons, whatever have you, whatever you need to use it for. But there's a lot of things that could be done with that. I use the process of consuming to represent the elixir of life and vitality and accomplishment of the great work and performance of one's true will. All of those concepts all tied into one. The final verse of this text states, quote, "On the ceremony of the end, let it be as it says in Liber 671, Aum," and 671 is Pyramidos, end quote. So again, we go back to Liber Pyramidos, perform the ending portion, which is section 2 of Pyramidos, and the ritual is complete. And you could see again the script. I outlined all of those parts of Liber Pyramidos and how to perform them step by step with a few notes. Hey, say this. Hey, perform this gesture. Hey, ring the bell here. Cut the cross. Go to this part of the temple. Very clear instructions if you look at the link below and click on it. So, depending on how long intercourse takes, let's be generous and say a half hour. Then I assume this ritual altogether takes about an hour and 20 minutes, plus whatever time the bathing beforehand takes. So that could be an extra 15-20 minutes, depending. That could be 15 minutes per person. It just depends on the people and how long they take for that process. This is an easily adapted ritual to whatever type of god one is invoking. Again, Crowley and Newberg used it for Jupiterian workings and the Paris workings. I believe it works wonderfully with the idea of union with the HGA, or even better, with Kether, via the mother and father coming together, and transcending division. The divine light would then be the primary focus in that formula. So you would you wouldn't use a planetary, you'd use the divine light itself, Kether, the point, imagery like the swan, white, white flecked gold. You could even adapt if you're working with a specific deity, like Heru Raha would fit well with Kether in my view, or he could be a solar deity as well, but he could work well with Kether since he's the highest in the pantheon of the Lima. Odin as the head of his pantheon, Zeus as the head of his pantheon, Obatala if you're into Santeria, Afro-Caribbean Yoruba-based practices. So you could work with the divine light if you're working with one of those deities. But there's a lot of ways you could adapt this ritual. And again, for further instructions on this text, especially the parts about Liber Pyramidos, which may be new to you and you've never used, see the PDF of this ritual in the description below. Like I said, I try to make this short, and it's a short text, so I hope it helps illuminate the nuances of this text, and I hope you learn something that you could, if not do this ritual, take some of these ideologies and put it into your own practice somehow. I'll catch y'all on the next one. Love is the law, love under will. Peace.